Now move on to the next session. We have Dr. Ajay Chaudhary, founder of HCL and chairman of EPIC Foundation, in conversation with Mr. Niloy, and joining them is Mr. Jeet Vijay, who is the CEO of Métis Startup Hub. So let's get into this chat and see what they have for us on this interesting topic.
Dr. Ajay Chaudhary and Mr. Jeet Vijay. Firstly, let me welcome you to this first of its kind open floor panel riveting under the theme India's Accelerated ESDM Growth, the Defining Decade. Also, allow me to welcome everyone today who has joined us for the Fireside chat discussing pivot on developing a robust startup and MSME ecosystem in India. As you all might be apprised that this year counts to the 16th edition of this annual flagship event, Vision Summit 2021, organized by the Indian Electronics and Semiconductor Association, that is aka IESA. In this quick interactive 1 hour of discussion, I, Niloy Banerjee, will be your moderator, or call me the host of this unique show. To not known, I have been chosen 2 times of the esteemed Polestar Journalism Awards. I have been a strategy consultant to many B2B tech magazines. Also have laid the foundation as one of the founding members of an acclaimed magazine named BIS Infotech. Also to add, I have been the part of, as the agenda of today's discussion, the defining decade of the Indian ESDM sector. Currently, I lead many researchers, writers, journals, also leading multiple editorial and communication teams across this sector. So, not wasting any more of your valuable time, let's welcome Mr. Ajay Chaudhary, founder HCL, Chairman, Board of Governors, IIT Patna, and NIFT Ranchi, and an esteemed member of the consultation group of the Science, Technology, and Innovation sector by the Vice Chairman, Niti Aayog. Alongside will be joining Mr. Jeet Vijay, who is the CEO of Métis Startup Hub, the nodal agency of the Ministry of Electronics and IT. Before I share the brief profile of the veterans, let me tell you, our audience specifically, that this space of discussion is more or large open to both of our speakers. Hence, in this session, we request both the speaker to engage and interact with each other, marking the milestone and defining the future of this young, ready India. Across this session, I will just be the moderator, compiling the thoughts and also getting to know the views shared by the veterans and aim at making it interactive and resembling to the flow under the very subject. So Dr. Ajay Chaudhary is one of the 6 founder members of HCL, whose vision was to give India its own microcomputer. Dr. Ajay Chaudhary has led the foundation of HCL's overseas operation, starting with Singapore in 1980s and later expanded to the other South Asian markets. Dr. Chaudhary is a highly decorated Indian industry icon with several honors to his credit for consistently contributing to building the brand India on the ICT world landscape and pioneering the cause and developing the Indian IT industry. Presently, he is also the chairman board of governors at IIT Patna and NIFT Ranchi, and an esteemed member of the consultation group on the science, technology, and innovation sector by the Vice Chairman, Niti Aayog. Also hot on the heels, our young dynamic Mr. Jeet has been consistently supporting and promoting deep tech startups across India. MSH is responsible for 51 plus incubators, 26 plus center of excellence, multiple accelerators, among other initiatives that he has driven. Also responsible for conceptualizing and implementing new schemes and programs to support more than 3,000 startups that are associated with the Métis Startup Hub. Who else could have been more apt than these 2 stalwarts who has witnessed the Moody's law defining a decade and on the other a new digital front ecosystem changing the technology corridors. They have witnessed the past decade, which was no less than a defining decade of startups and MSME ecosystem in India. Hence, not wasting any more time to this quick fireside chat, As said, this is not a Q&A, but an open floor for the veterans. Let's take it to another stepping stone. As we all know, that India is set to become the global hub for electronic products. With an economy of this size, this is very sector today contributes 3.4% to the GDP and is expected to contribute 6.4% in the next few years. Hence, deep tech startups to be instrumental in this growth engine. Augmenting the discussion, Mr. Jeet Vijay and Dr. Ajay Chaudhary, the floor is all yours, taking us through the importance of deep tech startups and in this evolving world. The floor is yours, gentlemen.
Well, actually, deep tech really involves multiple areas of science and technology and engineering. So literally, you need to converge multiple talents. And therefore, what better than India to create more deep tech startups? If you look at globally, Moderna can be considered a deep tech company. Blue Origin can be considered a deep tech company. And in India, if I were to take two very interesting deep tech companies, one of them is Pandorum, where I, as part of the Indian Angel Network, we have invested in them. And they're working on cornea repair. So this is something that would be of great value to the world. And the other one that I would like to mention is QNU, which is another very interesting company in the business of quantum cybersecurity. So I think more and more deep tech companies will come around in India, and therefore what you will see is that deep tech startups will be quite a big rage in India.
Right. So anything you want to add up, Mr. Jeet Vijay, for this regarding the same segment of the discussion what we are having? Mr. Jeet, can you hear me? Am I audible?
I think he's dropped off.
Okay. So in this scenario, as you were talking about the few companies, the unicorns, what you have been witnessing, I would like to get around with the second part of the discussion. I guess Mr. Jeet Vijay has joined in again.
Back.
Yes. Mr. Jeet, as we were discussing about the deep tech startups, do you want to give some valuable comments on that, on this panel of discussion?
Thank you. Yeah, yes. Thank you so much, Niloy. When we start thinking about deep tech, the question comes up is that India is the third largest startup ecosystem today with more than 50,000 registered startups. And then we start looking at where are we going in terms of the ecosystem. And the segmentation are close to 12,000 odd startups that classify as deep tech. But the whole definition of deep tech is more on the disruption. Are we actually creating something that's disruptive, that's going to change the paradigm of development, have a larger social impact, and high economic returns? Because if you look at the investment world and what is happening in the Indian ecosystem, there's more gravitation towards SaaS and software-oriented products. But deep tech actually involves a rethinking in terms of the gestation period, the R&D effort that goes into it, the high risk technical validation that is needed for these kind of startups. So market validation is a low parameter, but more of the technical validation is a critical component of it. But overall, the ecosystem globally has been growing more than 20% annualized rate of growth in terms of the role of deep tech. And be it on electronics, be it on IoT, be it on robotics, be it on hardware side, as we look at the growth in our ecosystem, we'll have to segment it in two parts. One is capturing the market share, which is what most of the startups focus on. Second is capturing the opportunity share. Opportunity share is what will redefine the parameters in the line for growth for our country and the world as we move forward. And all these technologies, drone, robotics, IoT, 5G, all these are path-breaking technologies that will play a crucial role as we move forward. And I think there's enough impact of these, be it in the aerospace, be it in the energy space, green energy, that is, we are talking about sciences, agriculture, healthcare, So there's a lot of opportunity in India in terms of revolutionizing the human condition through the engagement of deep tech startups in redefining the paradigm for the development. So I'll leave it for now as an open-ended discussion point as to the role that the deep tech will play. And Ajay sir is among us today, so he knows more than most people about the role of technology. He's been at the forefront for so many decades now, leading this journey in India.
Right. Thanks for your valuable inputs into this. As Mr. Dr. Ajay Chaudhary also just proved us through the development in this segment. And thank you again, Jeet, for your valuable insights on this. Also to understand about the Indian units of the global firms, which has been a key propeller to indigenous growth of academia and startup community. Also to understand further what you think about these Indian units of global firms that has been engaging with broader ecosystem of startups, academia, marking a shift from the early days of India design centers. So do you want to get around with this, talking about how the Indian design centers have been there and the indigenous growth of the academia and startup community alongside?
So basically, if you look at the design centers of global companies, this whole process started many, many years ago. And I think GE was the leader in starting this whole process. And over the years, they have looked at more and more companies have moved to India, and they have set up their design centers. The reason why design centers have moved to India, that the reason for it is that if you look at the seminal work this friend of mine had done, Vijay Mahajan, Dr. Vijay Mahajan in Austin, he wrote this book about the 86% opportunity many, many years ago. And he said that very clearly, global companies today design products for the world, sitting in the US or Europe, where only 16% of the population lives. What should be done is that they should design from locations where you can address 86% of the world's population. So if you took care of India, China, and Africa, these areas, these geographies actually contribute to 86%. So if they sit in India, they can actually design products which are valuable for 86%. And even if you design products for the 86%, you can address the lower end market in the developed markets also. So I think, to me, that is what these companies have done in India. The second thing that they have done is that they have created a large pool of people who've actually gone through this whole process of designing in India for the world. And I think that cohort of people, engineers they have created, are extremely valuable for us as a country. And a lot of them have left these positions and started their own startups. And they are doing designing of products in India, for India, and for the global market. So they have added tremendous amount of value in creating this whole ecosystem. And I think we should continue to take benefit of this ecosystem.
Right, Mr. Jeet, your valuable insights on the said discussion.
Yeah, with piggybacking on Ajay sir's comment, I think, if we look at historically, the MNCs or large corporates, they relocate for economies of scale or lowering the cost of production or capturing the comparative advantage of any nation that they operate in, and hence the outsourcing of manufacturing. Then realization that building the ecosystem where you work is important, and hence these whole design centers whereby skill is being upgraded as well as the products are being created. Now, if we look at moving forward, any corporate has to evolve as well. So we need to look at the mindset of not just design center. It has to be a distributed innovation network, because historically the whole idea of creation of a company is amalgamation of resources in a most productive manner to create the maximum output. Hence, a company is created, right? HR, production, marketing, sales. But when we look at in a gig economy or the way the society operates now, we need to leverage all the stakeholders that we work closely with. So a distributed innovation network is a framework which allows you to leverage academia. So for example, in US, a lot of companies do sponsored research, right? With academia. We need to look at our MNCs or large Indian corporates to be doing more of these because two things happen. One is low cost, high impact research can be done in academia. And second is because the corporate will only work on the innovation framework for quarter to quarter returns because they have to justify to their board. But doing sponsored research can really enable some outside the box thinking. Second is engaging with the startup community, which is the source of disruptive and carefree innovation. And a lot of these corporates have venture arms, right? So in US and abroad, you look at it, large companies will have a venture arm to engage with startups so they can identify solutions, innovations early on and onboard them in their strategic roadmap. And I think that's also a critical importance in India now for our large corporates to start looking at startups not as a something on the sidelines or some frivolous part of our ecosystem, but as a very critical component of where the society is moving, where the innovations are happening, and engaging with them proactively, robustly, so that they can not only benefit from the expertise and the supply chain network of large corporates, but also bring in some fresh thinking, disruptive ideas, and carefree spirit of innovation, which can really profoundly impact a corporate culture as well as product portfolio development. So I think there's a huge need for us to, for our international companies in India and large companies to engage in a more multi-model network with our ecosystem to benefit everyone more together.
Right. Adding up to this already discussion, what we are having. So it's a great news to understand that 30 plus unicorn already this year have raised fund. And how many more are expected? Firstly, I wanted to understand on that. Also to add up, with the deluge of startup being incepted, gaining interest from a VC, the venture capitalists for funding is getting more crucial. Hence, gentlemen, what would be that one advice for the startups to adhere to join the league of becoming an unicorn?
So, since IESA addresses the ESDM market, I'd rather focus on the ESDM area. Because if you look at all the noise around unicorns being created, those are pretty much software companies. Okay, software startups. So I think we need to look at hardware startups very differently. And we are still far away from creating hardware startups in India for being unicorns. We need to do a lot of work from the industry. We need to do a lot of work from the government to make all this happen. And so if you want to look at startups who want to go ahead and be recognized and be ready to get investment from VCs in the ESDM area, the design and manufacturing of electronic products, I think like any other startup, whether it's a software or a hardware startup, the first thing that any VC looks at is obviously the idea, but behind that, who are the founders? And to me, if the founders are able to pitch about themselves and talk about how they intend to create the company and scale the company, that is what will appeal to VCs. Today, the funding for hardware is very low, but I think more and more interest is coming up in India due to one major reason. And the reason is that India is a huge market for electronics. Okay. And this huge market of electronics has to create more Indian brands. You can't be just sitting around and saying that we are going to have only global brands and Chinese brands coming into the electronic marketplace. You have to have more Indian brands take a place in this whole area. So I think if more and more Indian companies get into the hardware startup space where they could be either fabless design companies, or they could be design centers for products, or they could just design products and then manufacture them. These kind of startups will be of great value to the country. And I think we need more and more of them to make India have a position in the ESDM marketplace. So I think startups need to be able to attract VCs with uh, with with ideas and their backgrounds in terms of what they can do for their companies. So the background of the founders is going to be super critical.
So it seems like silicon is a distant future because maybe we are not listening with the sand left over here in this country. But yes, I would like to also hear from uh, our another speaker who has been there talking about the startups community for a larger part, and also if he can add and give us some enlightenment about the design process and if we can make silicon someday. So please.
No, I think what Ajay sir has mentioned is very apt. That it's a
Right.
team. Team is the critical component of any company. But to go back to your larger question, how many unicorns have come and how many more to come? If we just go by that 1% rule, right, which is a fallacious way to look at it, but 50,000, 1% is still a large number, right? We are not even hitting a century yet. So give it another year. This has been a year of unicorns in India. The pace with which the unicorns are being created is accelerating. Uh, but generally they are the SaaS field that's given. But when we start looking at what actually gets a startup funded or what should be the driving motivation, I think that one of the biggest thing we look at is what is your purpose for being in existence? Are you trying to solve a genuine problem or are you in this for a quick buck? Are you just looking to cash in on the euphoria of startup momentum or are you really solving a problem? Because once you define and you're clear on your purpose for existence, then that passion can translate into performance. And then the biggest thing when we talk technicality wise is, nothing speaks greater than a customer or your product's testimonial. So if you do a pilot or a paid pilot, unpaid pilot, but you can prove the technical viability and economic feasibility of your product offering, then the investors will come chasing you with their wallet open because ultimately everyone wants to make money, but India capital market is still relatively fragile and in fledgling state. So we are looking for low risk and high return in short time duration. We are not Silicon Valley where people bet on ideas and vision. We are India where we bet on track record and traction. Therefore, it's critically important for us to tell our startups that build a product, but get it tested, get it validated, get it deployed so people can at least believe in your traction and your technical product. And then you go for the investor post that. If you're chasing investors on a PPT, then there's only so far you'll go in this race. You really need to actually have a sound footing in terms of what you're doing. And when we start talking about it from the perspective of ESDM in particular, government has a huge role to play because funding intervention is strongly required in an ecosystem where private sector is a little hesitant to come in. So be it healthcare or be it electronics, there the long gestation period, long sales cycle, a lot of regulatory hurdles. That's where the investor private money shies away. And I think government has a lot of role to play in creating enabling environment and providing funding support at early critical junctures.
Amazing. So it was quite an insightful rejoinder, gentlemen. Thank you. And to extend the discussion ahead on the policies, as Dr. Ajay said and also Mr. Jeet said. So this part of discussion will be underlining that India has now set policies to the interest of inviting and attracting major investments across many verticals. Shall it be the smart cities, mobile manufacturing, aerospace and defense, or robotics, specifically droning across electronics and semi-B2B tech startups? So this part of the discussion, gentlemen, shall be underlining how India is evolving in this space. And as said, are the policies on the right deck? Are the cards ready? And is it not anymore the PPT or something? And we are really viably going ahead and bringing ideas to make giving a contribution to the global ecosystem.
So basically, if you, as I said earlier, there is a great opportunity in India for designing for India and designing for the world. If you look at designing for the world is concerned, engineering design and engineering design services business started in India about 15, 20 years ago. And as a matter of fact, my company that I founded, HCL, is one of the absolute leaders in this area. And we started initially designing, do design work and engineering work for Cisco, and then went on to do it for hundreds of companies globally. And we have designed VLSI chips for all kinds of companies. So a lot of this capability got developed with the engineering design export business. And therefore, this capability is sitting around. In addition to the global design centers we talked about, there's a huge amount of capability sitting in India with engineering, research and design. And that is sitting with HCL and Wipro and Infosys and TCS, all of us. So I think that capability exists, but none of it has been applied for India. And that's the sad part. So I think what we now need to do is to create policies in the country which will encourage Indian design and designing and making products for India. So till now, if you look at, the government has come up with fantastic policies for manufacturing. And those PLI policies for manufacturing and electronics, for example, are absolutely going to give a huge push to electronic manufacturing. But is there a design content, or is there any design being talked about? No. So I think my recommendation to the government would be to put a lot of effort on now taking India towards design, so that the value addition in the country increases. Today, if you look at the electronic industry, and I looked at about 8 or 10 products, the total size of the market is around $16 to $17 billion. Okay. Out of that $16, $17 billion that I looked at only for 10 products, the domestic brands is $1.5 billion. Everything else is imported. Now, rest of it is, some of it is manufactured in India. But what is the value addition in India? And I think the value addition has to come from our design knowledge, engineering knowledge. And I think that is where we need to put a lot of effort. I think that MeitY is looking at some strategies to, define this and take it forward. And I would encourage them to do a lot of support towards designing in India. And I think if we were to aggregate our demand, which is consisting of state governments and central government and all the demands that there exist for the government, and we aggregate that demand and start to make products for India, it will be of great value. And this is where I have recently, with some of my friends, created a foundation called EPIC. And we actually want to make sure that something like this happens in the country. And what I want to see happen is that we, over a period of next 10 years, work on creating our own Indian brands and bring electronics back to where it was 30 years ago, when imports were hardly there. And we, when imports started, WTO opened up the whole market, and then Indian brands disappeared. So we now need to work on recreating Indian brands and bring them back. And I think that is what the foundation that I've set up wants to do. And that is what the government should also work towards doing, because otherwise, for two reasons, for security reasons and geopolitical reasons, we should have our own Atmanirbhar product strategy, which should be of designing products and designing chips for India. Now, if we want to make semiconductors happen in the country and semiconductor manufacturing happen in the country, how is it going to happen unless we design chips in India and we feed it into the semiconductor plant? It's not going to happen in any other way. So I think that is where I would feel that a lot of impetus has to be played by industry, government, and all of us to make sure something like this happens.
Mr. Jeet, you want to add up something about the policies or to the interest and inviting and attracting, how it has been till now, the things you think to be changed?
It's absolutely critical what Jisra has mentioned, and so there's a bifurcation on this. So there's a role that the large industry and industry leaders have to play, and there's a role that the government has to play. And be it the foundation that Sir is setting up, focusing on and putting the, big floodlights on this issue and addressing the market gap there, which is very critical. And the large corporate from a private sector and from a startups perspective is critical because these are the corporates that have the supply chain, that have the manufacturing capability, that have the technical expertise to support these startups, which don't have these things, right? So for them to grow and groom these, I think industry has to play a critical role. Where VCs don't exist, the strategic investors have to exist, which will be the corporates. Now, speaking from the government side, so of course, there is a need for as sort of very clearly mentioned, WTO and what happened in the 90s and after that, and all of our brands that used to be pervasive in every Indian household disappeared. Now, be it from the car to your washing machine to your television set or your handset or your mobile phone, look at anything and everything. We are not the ones who are creating it, and it's not only about manufacturing, it's about intellectual property. It's about design capability. Then it's about scalable manufacturing. All these things play a vital role in the value chain in terms of bringing a product to the consumer. And under our Honorable Prime Minister's vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat, a lot of initiatives have been launched in the last few years, and especially as we looked at the PLI, Production Linked Incentive Scheme, or SPECS, Scheme for the Promotion of Manufacture of Electronic Component and Semiconductor, our Electronic Manufacturing Cluster, EFC scheme. So all these schemes are coming to incentivize large players, either for international players to come to India, given the geopolitics of India and China and the supply chain integrity that exists, or it's for promotion of the Indian industries. So a concentrated effort is being made under our Prime Minister, and as well as particularly in our ministry at MIT, on focusing on ESDM sector. Aside from the SaaS industry, like how do you take this economy to the next level in terms of building the capability and capacity of local manufacturers, design houses, and the young technical entrepreneurs who have the capacity and capability to create all these. Because we have, I deal with a lot of young entrepreneurs, so they can do the PCB board, they can do everything from circuit design, RF, antennas, and everything. Challenges, they don't have the component accessibility. They don't have the ability to test these things out. So how do you bring testing and certification facilities available to them? How do you enable all these at a low cost? Because getting a basic certification and testing can run you into tens of lakhs of rupees, which can be a major hurdle for any startup. So working in the government, we are looking at various schemes, not only for large industries and international players, but also for local startups. How do we provide them these resources, which are very critical for them to at least get their product to the market? And I think with what Ajay sir is doing under his leadership, I think there's a lot that ministry, through consultation from the leaders, is learning from in terms of how do we put the right building blocks around this framework.
Indeed, the word should be design in India now. So to move ahead, the pandemic was hit all around the globe. Not to mention and to understand also that the heat was felt all around enterprises or the startups. Hence, I just wanted to know your valuable words and understanding on the role government played and can play in helping these budding enterprises and also mid-sized companies. Gentlemen.
So I think pandemic was a real disaster for small companies. A lot of startups closed down and a lot of MSMEs closed down. So it was a real disaster. They didn't have the staying power. But during this period, if I look at if I look at the first round of COVID that happened last year, during that time, government did a lot of great work. They did something that has never been done in this country before. They brought together academia, research, government, private sector, DRDO, everybody came together to help companies survive and to create products during that period for COVID. So lots of COVID challenges were thrown, and these challenges resulted in some of the startups who were stuck to pivot into doing things which they were not doing. And for example, I was personally involved with a company called Doka Robotics, and they were in the business of making robots. And when the Prime Minister threw this challenge that we must make our own ventilator in the country, they came up with this whole idea to make the ventilator. And we created a team which worked pretty much 24/7 for 90 days. And out came a ventilator. Typically, a ventilator would take 8 to 12 months to develop. But during this compressed period when the demand was so high, this could happen. And interestingly, they pivoted. Interestingly, they've now pivoted totally away from robotics to medical devices. So, these kind of things happened, but the government was extremely helpful at that time. I still remember calling up Invest India and saying, I'm not able to get certain components for the ventilator. They're very short. There's a huge shortage of these components. Can you help? And, they rang up people in various embassies and helped us to get those components. So, these kind of things are also happening and did happen. And I think a lot of new companies got formed, a lot of companies pivoted. However, those who could not survive had to do a lot of other things like cutting costs and reducing rents and a whole bunch of stuff. So, but I think this is the first time India as a country came together in a lot of ways. And I'm quite proud of the fact that this ventilator company is going to be a 100 crore company this year.
Massive. So, Jeet, you want to add upon the heat, what you felt around the pandemic time, and also what kind of initiatives and thoughts you had for the startups ecosystem in India?
No, I think, it gives me goosebumps just recalling those early days. And, truer words couldn't be said that, India came together and how we handled it. And of course, there's always need for improvement. But aside from just a startup, through the whole DBT scheme and various ways the government tried to make sure that the country and the humanity can keep on running and sustaining in the most unpredictable and difficult time where we didn't have the infrastructure, where we didn't have the contingency plans. We had not the foresight to even imagine remotely such a thing would happen. But the craziness of the whole system was we didn't have a single PPE producer back then. And then India was making PPE left and right. There are so many startups who got into that business. So basic PPE equipment to your N95 mask, to your ventilators, and even later in the oxygen supply, the concentrators, you would see people jumping in. And, this is why when we say, necessity is the mother of invention. So when we all came together so quickly, and India is a jugaad innovation, right? So we look at putting everything together with the minimal resources. We send Mangalyaan to, at 1/10 the cost of NASA, right? So we know how to operate in a frugal innovation framework. We know our entrepreneurs are as agile and as big of dreamers as the ones who find in Silicon Valley. But it's the lack of opportunity that they had. And so specifically at the ministry, what we did during that time is we knew that the funding had dried up for the startups, and to sustain them, so we launched a couple of different schemes. One was Sashakt, which was focused on providing funding intervention at an early stage to startups to pivot their products into post-COVID technologies or COVID-related technologies. So we funded 40 odd companies through that startup funding program. We have also launched some scheme which was focused on providing early stage funding. So a lot of funding initiatives came. Also, we looked at providing aggregator opportunities for startups. We were able to aggregate resources from industry, from international partners to bring those to our startups to address the COVID needs.
Thanks, Jeet, for the insights. As said, yes, the pandemic was the heat everywhere which was felt, but yes, India came together, as Mr. Ajay Chaudhary said, and the initiatives what has been taken by the government are certainly to be lauded. Not to forget that budding enterprises and startups did feel the pandemic, as we said before. To move ahead to the discussion, we shall go across the GUI programs, the Government of India programs, as I remember, I went to an Intel press conference taking the name of the company where our Honorable Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad said that this is a country of Jugaad technology and we can create anything with that. So yes, that are already in place to assist on the GUI programs if our gentleman wants to highlight on that. And also to how they are assisting to the growth of startups in the electronics and semiconductor industry specifically. And let's start the discussion understanding, as said again, the GUI programs and the assistance in this prolific growth of startups.
So actually, many years ago, MeitY had this group where I was also a member, where we looked at this whole idea of setting up electronics startups with various universities, etc. And at that time, many of these startups were created along with IESA, providing a lot of technology support.
Nobody would
So
know any better.
IESA, MeitY,
It happens at home all the time, right?
and STPI
My forehead was
sort of
shiny.
came together. It was all
Do we have
funded
any
by
powder?
MeitY and funneled through STPI. And they set up these electropreneur parks. So the
I don't
first
know, is it
one
too shiny?
got set up in Delhi. And I've been a mentor to that literally from day one. And I must say the success rate is phenomenal. What we have seen them do is great. Like, I think 44, 45 odd products have been created in the last 5 years. There are 50 odd patents that they have filed. And the valuation, a lot of these companies is pretty good. Close to about 300 crore odd valuations that I have seen of various companies. So, you know, similar things happened in Hyderabad where a similar organization was created for fabulous design and so on. So I think the MeitY has actually done a very good job in creating electropreneur parks. And my suggestion would be to create many, many more. Because what we need is that we have to have whole bunch of environments created for electronic startups to grow. Because it's very different from software. In the case of software, the initial investments are pretty much zero. All that they have to do is put together a few computers and, you know, go to AWS and get some stuff, you know, some time, etc., etc. But in the case of hardware, they need to have components, they need to have testing machines, they need a whole bunch of equipment. And that is where electropreneur park type of opportunities that the government has created are phenomenal. And I think they should encourage more of these to happen. Because if one electropreneur park can create 44 products, just imagine what 20 can do. And we need 20, 30 of those all around the country. And I'm sure Jeet is probably looking at something like this to happen, because I think that is what is required in this whole area of electronics. And the government policy needs to support it, and government money has to come in to make sure design and development and creation of startups happens in a very big way. And IESA has played a huge role in that, I must say.
Yes, they have been instrumental indeed. So understanding on the GOA programs and assistance to the prolific growth of startups, Jeet, your insights to the floor of this discussion.
Oh yeah, thank you so much. So I'll give you a little overview. So MeitY Startup Hub currently has over 3,000 startups in its network, and they're mainly electronics and IT related startups. We have set up 26 different centers of excellence across India. So be it in AR, VR, be it in robotics, drone, 5G, we are looking at all the emerging technology areas, and geographically we are dispersing them to create clusters. So 26 different have been set up across the country. And as Rajesh sir mentioned, so he's been involved with one of them from the very beginning, and each of them has a really committed, passionate, successful entrepreneur as the driving vision behind it. So they have been generating a lot of impact for us. Also, we are supporting 51 different incubators under our various scheme, Type 2.0 particularly. And they are all in healthcare, IT, pharma, electronics. They are in different verticals, agri-tech. Also, we have something called patent reimbursement scheme. So protecting and promoting intellectual capital of India is paramount to us. Therefore, we reimburse patent filing expenses and IP protection expenses for our entrepreneurs and startups. Also, we give funding for idea level startups, even before they, or idea level entrepreneurs, even before they register a company. We provide funding in the form of entrepreneur in residence grant so they can validate their idea. We provide funding for prototype and product development, and then we provide funding for commercialization as well, up to 40 lakh to each startup. A couple of weeks ago, we gave 40 lakh to 44 different startups in that program. Also, we have an accelerator scheme because a lot of incubators have been set up, a lot of startups have come, but how do you scale startups? So we are promoting accelerator ecosystem in India and will be supporting 300 startups under a Samrit scheme. Lastly, we also have a scheme called Electronic Development Fund. It's a fund of fund being managed by Can Bank, which invests in daughter VC funds. And the goal is to invest in electronics and hardware startups through that fund of fund, because there's not enough VC funding available for electronic and hardware startups. So we set up a fund of fund for that purpose. So if you look at the whole value chain of a startup from idea level and IP protection to scale funding through VC fund, Mighty has one or the other scheme to promote and protect them. Also, we are looking at new scheme for Fabless. That's also in the pipeline that we are looking at. And also we are looking at a couple of other schemes where we can support these entrepreneurs and startups in tier 2 and tier 3 cities as well. Because Bangalore, Pune, Mumbai, Chennai, Hyderabad, Delhi, NCR, all these regions have enough corporates and investors. And we need to make sure there's an inclusive, equitable, and sustainable development happening across India. So we are looking at tier 2 and tier 3 schemes. And as Ajay sir mentioned, there's a huge need to diffuse this ecosystem. And our honorable minister and our minister of state, they're both very entrepreneurial people with a hard vision. And they have mandated us that we need to do 10x growth in terms of support we provide to startups. And we have to actively engage with the corporates and investors, because we're engaging a lot with academia, which is critical, but we need to engage more with investors and corporates. Because ultimately, corporates are the best agent for scaling. They have done it for their companies and they can help a startup scale as well. So we'll be looking at Ajay sir for his guidance in terms of how do we provide more effective support to startup. And this is my pitch to him, that I'll be reaching out to him as well to get more of his engagement with us so we can come up with new programs and scheme. Because I'll tell you one thing, ministry is all ears in terms of taking private sector's help in realizing this, common goal of Atmanirbhar Bharat and making sure that we can rise by our own bootstraps and take care of our own people without having to depend on anybody from outside.
Just adding to this discussion itself, Mr. Jeet, I just wanted to add up the latest collaborations, as you said, and also the key strategies that to support the startup growth in India. If you can specifically underline a few of them for us.
See, so the idea is that government, when we look at it, government's role is to provide an enabling environment. So we cannot be, one-stop solution for everything. So one thing we're looking at is reform of policies and ease of doing business for startups. So we work with DPIIT as well on Startup India registration and definitional nature. Also, we look at making sure there's a coordination among different ministries for different schemes. So we are developing a digital platform where all the schemes, all the programs, all the manufacturing and testing facilities are visible on one platform, and the entrepreneur can book them online. Because currently entrepreneurs don't even have visibility of what incubator is available, what testing facilities are available. So we are trying to create a digital platform where everything is available and everyone can book their resources as needed. Because currently a lot of capex has been spent, but ROI on that capex has been very minimal. So we want to make sure there's more visibility. Third thing we are looking at is providing early funding intervention until the commercialization level. We don't want to get into the business of funding high growth companies because that's the role of a smart investor. And for that purpose, we are very actively engaging with various funding platforms, be it Mumbai Angel, Indian Angel, Let's Venture, Venture Catalyst, and other funding platforms, which are building the investor ecosystem across India. That, hey, how can we partner with you that you can leverage government schemes, government programs to build an investor ecosystem in India? Because rupee capital in India is limited still. And a lot of money still is available in India, and that is looking for new alternate asset classes to invest in. So we want to create more investor ecosystem as well. So we are working with them on that. And lastly, we are working with all the different corporates in terms of figuring out, how can we engage with them to provide startup solutions to them, which they can either adopt for themselves or they can adopt in their clients' projects. So be it, so HCL is also a potential company that we would like to work with to understand how we can support them and their clients' needs globally. Because as Sir mentioned, what can work in India can work in most of the countries at least, LDC, less developed countries, it can definitely work. So make in India, but make for the world. And so we are looking at how do we leverage each ecosystem player for their competencies, capabilities, and their network, so we can provide a leveraged effect to our startups.
That's insightful, Jeet. Thanks for sharing all the details what you have been just moving around with to make India really a design hub globally. Let's not deviate the word digital transformation anymore. Like it has been very crony all around. Like everybody wants to get around with the word digital transformation today. So it's indeed shaping the Indian market, and it has been a new powerhouse of innovation. Hence, moving to the next level of discussion, what is this said transformation, Mr. Ajay Chaudhary, and would like to know from Mr. Jeet Vijay, that and the key innovation startups are tapping, helping the ESDM ecosystem to the next height of the said digital transformation.
To me, digital transformation is a huge buzzword, as you yourself sort of hinted. So I don't think you should worry too much about digital transformation. What we should worry about is what can we really do in this ESDM ecosystem. And I think the answers are pretty much staring at us, that we need to be creating policies for making India a design country rather than just a manufacturing country. And I think that is where I would feel that we should pay a lot of attention. Like in the foundation that I've set up, our objective is to take products and design them from chip to system. And that's exactly what I think we should be looking at doing more and more of, so that we have a great startup ecosystem created. And maybe in the next 10 years, we could have 50 to 100 unicorns in the hardware space.
Right. Mr. Jeet, you want to add up something about the said digital transformation as we all name it today?
No, I would tend to agree with just on this, but I'll deviate from that because last 2 days I spent at Pragati Maidan for the launch of Gati Shakti national program on multimodal connectivity that our Honorable Prime Minister launched. And, his vision is very practical and very clear. That everything should be visible, everything should be coordinated, everything should be transparent. So it'll bring efficiency and reduction in cost and ease of life. And so every agency that's, be it roadways, railways, highways, waterways, airways, all the projects should be synchronized so that there is an availability of information for better planning for all the ministries and for corporates and for citizens. So digital platform is what is allowing that to happen. And we have seen that the impact that the this time. So a lot of these things, benefits have come to the consumer on a daily livelihood basis. So I think there's a huge opportunity for us to leverage the digital ecosystem that is being built, because I would deviate from ESDM a little bit, that we are building a platform economy on a cloud infrastructure powered by data. So that is a reality that is happening. Now we have to make sure that the digital and the physical can work together. The software and the hardware can work together to make smart hardwares. Use of IoT, use of sensors, use of these technologies, which not only make product, but provide enhanced experience for the consumers. And I think be it safety or be it experience, that is what we need to focus on as we build products. And I think digital and hardware both have an important role to play. And the interface and the nexus at which they operate can create a significant value add in terms of the new generation of products that are being created for the people.
So, of course, let's go to the playground now. So you gentlemen might be agreed to the word playground with this, as this is the interesting part of the discussion. Perhaps the leaders sharing the vision on advanced technologies, which I also call as the playground, like AI, IoT, as we mentioned, machine learning, virtual reality, etc. So let's know from the leaders on how they imagine the electronics industry ecosystem in India to grow with the surge of these technologies.
Niloy, just a small time check,
Yes.
please. So,
Right.
Okay.
Sandeep, your-
So,
So actually, we are in this 1 hour term, so I think so we are already in two. So Sandeep, if you want, we can get on with the last two questions maybe after this.
Niloy, you can just go ahead with any closing comments. I was just reminding you of the time check, that's all.
Okay, so right. So after this playground question, maybe we can just wrap that. Okay. Please, gentlemen, let's hear it from you on this. A
so I'm
brief
going to
conclusion.
defer to Jeet to talk about the playground
Right.
point, and I will add to it. I've been taking the lead till now. Let him take the
Right,
lead now.
right. Please, Mr. G. Quickly, your inputs on this.
Come on, sir, you tricked me. I was always piggybacking on what you were saying. So. No, but I see. For me, I've stopped actually even envisioning what is out there because India is a rainbow of opportunities, from healthcare to agriculture, manufacturing, cybersecurity, defense. Every sector you look at, there's a ton of opportunities. It's a rainbow because the opportunity and the need is so big. The country is so heterogeneous, there's so much diversity and there's so much passion, drive, and dreams that our youngsters have, that so many of our experts have, that I think what India was in 90s is very different than what it is today, and what India will be by 2025, and then 2047, the 100 years. It's going to be marvelously different, and I think we're going to be operating in a country that we don't even recognize. But one thing I know for sure, we will be a leading powerhouse of innovation, technology, and economics as we move into the 100 years of India's independence.
So
Okay,
let
Jay,
me
you
add
want
to
to-
that. I think
Yes.
what is very critical to my mind is that if we look at a coin, and one side of the coin is software, the other side of the coin is hardware. And the difference between hardware and software, as Jeet has also alluded, is blurring. There is nothing called hardware or software. It's actually becoming a system. And therefore, a hardware has huge amount of software today, okay, which was not true to, if you look at 15, 20 years ago. And all these technologies that are coming around are going to add more and more in terms of what kind of problems can be solved for the country. And that is what all these new technologies will do for us. I would like to mention as a closing comment, one major area which I believe the country should do. Many years ago, I wrote a report for the government, and I called electronics a meta resource. I think it's now become an absolute meta resource. Tell me one product in the country or one area where electronics doesn't exist. Electronics is part of everything that you do. Right. So my recommendation and suggestion would be that the country and the government starts to look at everything together and aggregate all the demands together, whether it is medical devices, whether it is space, whether it is railways, whether it is any of the ministries of the government, if I call it. Just the way the Honorable Prime Minister has come up with this whole idea of Gati Shakti. I think we need to come up with electronics Gati Shakti now, where we need to bring everything together, and we should have somebody looking at it holistically, not in different silos. Okay, and that will bring the strength of the country, the size of the country, the size of the market together, which will attract more and more investments into electronics, hardware, and if we do design, manufacturing, etc., in different areas, we would create enough, SOCs and chips in the country which can feed a semiconductor plant. So we need to look at it holistically. We should not look at it from just the perspective of what MeitY is doing today. MeitY is doing a lot, but I think a lot of other ministries need to come under this whole, mega Shakti of electronics in a manner.
Right. So to the concluding note is that thank you firstly, gentlemen, for your valuable time and making it indeed a fireside chat as we have named it. I believe the discussion has taken our audience towards a new vision under the theme, India's accelerated ESG and growth, the defining decade. We see it strongly defined indeed. So glad everyone for joining us. Stay tuned for more action-packed sessions during these days of Vision Summit. Thank you, gentlemen, once again.
Thank you, Niloy. Thank you, Jeet.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, bye-bye.